And welcome everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I got teacher voice. Okay. So my name is Linda Walker. I am a professor in the biology department. I was the first woman hired in the biology department. 21 years ago, and now our department is 50% female, 50% male. You take really good stride. And it wasn't always pretty, I'll tell you that. So all of you who worry about tenacity, if you've done it, things will change if they should change. And our biology department is very good, just like all the other departments at UCF. It also says I'm the director of our Center for Success for Women Faculty. I am. So I have helped to institute a number of career-life balance policy changes on campus. We now have paid parental leave. We now have expected public parking. We have nursing home rooms on campus. All sorts of things. Not just for faculty, they are for everybody. Okay? All those things happened in the last 5 years. So if you guys are undergrads right now, you don't even know they didn't used to exist. So this is kind of, I'm just talking off my head here. This is kind of what ideas is all around. Right? These changes, and once they happen, they're institutionalized. You don't even realize it didn't used to be so good. What else is to say about me here? I am a marine biologist. Okay, so I was asked to come and talk to you guys about the biology and the ecology of red tide. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. When I was an undergrad, about 30 years ago, there was only one algal bloom species out there. It was red tide. Right? Now, if you read the news or anything else, you'll see lots of pictures. Okay, these are really pretty pictures. They're a little faded here, but really pretty bad pictures. And in a single water sample from the Indian River Lagoon on the east coast of Florida, this is how many algal bloom species you can find in a single liter of water. So we're not just talking one, there are actually lots of algal bloom species out there, each scary in its own different way. Okay, and my research area is really coastal ecology, restoration, and conservation, and the main focal species I have is oysters. All right, everybody loves oysters for lots of different reasons. This is actually a picture of the restored oyster reef in Canaveral National Seashore, and this picture is brown tide. We are going to get to red tide in a second, but I'm starting with brown tide because that's what my actual research is on. And I want to be able to start off with some real data instead of my data instead of somebody else's. So what's going on? Brown tide, Ariambra lagunensis versus the eastern oyster, Chrysoptera virginica. This is the oyster you will eat if you ever eat oysters. Okay, so you can see a picture here. All right, these are oysters on the half shell. I don't know if they're sold here in this building, but a lot of people like them. That's what a lot of people think about when they think about oysters for consumption. But in reality, oysters have so many other important aspects to them that, in my opinion, they are the most important organism on this planet. All right, without oysters, we would have a lot less food for the other things we like to eat, like fish and shrimp and crab. All eat oysters or other organisms that live along sea oysters. They protect our shorelines from erosion. They sequester nutrients, extra nitrogen, carbon, things like that. And they filter water, right? That's mostly what people care about. And a single oyster, about a 3-inch oyster, that I would be eating on the half shell, a single oyster in a day will filter 50 gallons of water. Right? Our oyster reefs will have, I don't know, 100,000 oysters on a single reef. Think about how much water filtration is going on. So this is my way of expressing to you guys, you gotta love the oysters. You gotta love them. You can eat them, that's fine. Well, they're sustainably harvested, but you have to love them for what their ecosystem services are also. And so this is one slide, the only slide I'm going to show you about our research with oysters versus brown tide. And what you can see here, this is a restoration project. So we took a dead oyster reef and we brought it back to life. And on the x-axis, what you can see is the year of monitoring, starting in 2008, going up to about a week ago. So we restored the reef in 2007, so we were about the time then, okay? My son's in college, so I actually know how old you all were and what you were thinking then. But this is our first set of reefs. On the y-axis, number of live oysters per square meter. And you per day. A meter is only like this big. So lots of filtering going on. This was in the Sea Lagoon, Northern Indian River Lagoon. This was a 15-month brown tide. All right, look what it did. It took our gold standard and brought it down by about 50%. And what we've learned, and we're working on the publication right now, is that the brown tide didn't kill the adult oysters. What it did instead was make it so there was no new oysters coming into the system. And in Florida, we depend on all those new oysters constantly coming in. So a half to a third of what we had is new equipment. And the brown tide made it so that wasn't possible. So, sorry, we'll get it. Okay, too far. All right, so now what I'm going to do is move on to red tide. So I've given you some data on brown tide, and I'm going to compare red tide versus brown tide. I said every algal bloom is different, so these are just two comparisons to show you pretty much the range of what's going on. All right, they both have interesting names. All right, we don't need to worry about the names, but Perennial brevis is red tide. Okay, Areombra lugulensis is brown tide. They're both microalgae, microscopic algal forms. All right, slightly different, but that's enough for that. Brown tide was first described in Texas in 1990. Nobody had ever documented it. Okay, a lot of you guys were alive in 1990. It came to Florida in 2012. When it first came to the Indian River Lagoon, it took them 7-8 months to figure out what it was because it had never been here before. At least it had never been documented and was blooming. The most important thing I'll tell you today about red tide is that it is native. Okay, the brown tide is invasive. All right, we think it got brought over in ballast water and ships from Texas. Red tide is native to Florida. Perennial brevis is only found in the Gulf of Mexico and where the currents take it from there. It was first reported on shore in 1844. Long before there was a large amount of development. Okay, so that makes you think about it a little bit differently, I hope. They actually documented it offshore in the 1700s. The people on the wooden boats would be seeing, discolored water, and that was recorded in their ship logs. Okay, so those are two big differences. Brown tide is considered an ecosystem disruptive algal bloom, whereas red tide is considered a harmful algal bloom, or an HAB. All right, that's what Lee was showing in the beginning. What's the difference here? This is so human-based. All right, it's human-based in that harmful algal blooms impact humans, okay, and organisms that we think are really cool. All right, so red tide has neurotoxins. All right, they're brevetoxins is their specific name. They attack the nervous system. They will kill fish. They will kill turtles. They will kill marine mammals. They will kill birds. Okay, we care about all these things, right? They are consumed by filter feeders, but at least as far as the literature shows right now, oysters and mussels and things like that are not killed by red tide. Right? They do have some possible impacts on other invertebrates like crabs, but basically they are dying. They do say that when there is a red tide around, do not eat anything because they've been filtering this water or living in it. And humans, as many of you guys know, there are pretty serious respiratory impacts going on with red tide. And the reason for that is that the cell wall surrounding each cell, each microalgal cell, is really thin. So even with a wave crashing, it will actually break the cell wall, and those toxins then get into the air. They're aerosolized, so you can breathe them in. And if you've ever been in an area of red tide, all of a sudden your throat starts burning. All right, that's the indication you probably don't want to be doing that. So compare that to brown tide. Okay, it doesn't get the harmful. It doesn't have any neurotoxins that they know of. But fish kills, there were fish kills on the east coast of Florida about 2 years ago, really big bad ones. And they were attributed to brown tide, but it was brown tide dying, the bacteria eating the dying cells and reducing the amount of oxygen. So it wasn't a direct impact, it was indirect. They are, as I said, killing oysters, at least small baby oysters, and but they do not have impacts on humans. So we become harmful if we impact humans. quite native to the Gulf of Mexico, at least red tide is, and it has been showing up pretty much every year that I talked about when I was an undergrad taking a marine biology class. So somewhere 10 to 40 miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, usually in the summer months when it's nice and warm, it starts on the ocean bottom. Okay, the cells are there. They're just hanging out there, and they start getting more active when it's warmer, and they're just doing their thing, okay? Then upwelling, which is water moving from the bottom to the surface. Upwelling brings them to the surface, then the wind and the currents bring them to shore. It's that simple, all right? They need three things to survive, which is pretty much every microalga out there, or any species of plant, really. They need light, they need the correct temperatures, and they need nutrients. This is where everybody talks about red tide, is the nutrient levels. The other main thing to remember when you leave is that, well, there are always some nutrients in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, they figured out that there are lots of different nutrient sources that red tide will use. So it may be fertilizer, okay? Is too much fertilizer escaping into our coastal waters? Absolutely. But they can also use human poo-poo. And poo-poo is getting in there from septic systems. Right? There's lots of possible sources. So all the agencies, NOAA, CGRAM, different groups are saying we cannot identify culprits, okay, and say that they are the cause of red tide. Because the red tide cells can use different types of nitrogen, different types of phosphorus. They'll use whatever's available. Okay, and this may be a little hard to see, but I wanted to show you guys now where we are with red tide at the moment. This is last week, right? Here's the state of Florida, and there are folks whose entire job is to do these cell counts, okay? For Coretta brevis, for all those other algal bloom species that are out there. And it's hard to see the dots, which is good. The gray ones mean that we do not have Coretta brevis at the present time. Okay, the only down here in Charlotte County that we actually see some colored dots. So right now, we are really localized. Where were we a year ago? So the same time a year ago, you can see it's a little bit warmer last winter. There's a lot more red and yellows here. And our worst is here. Okay, this was in October. Look at all the red. It was up in the Panhandle. The whole west coast of Florida was being devastated. And it had found its way through the currents all the way up the east coast of Florida. So if you had driven directly east from here, you would have been hitting red tide. Is this the worst bloom we've ever had? Not yet, right? But since there are those colored dots still down in Manatee County, maybe it will be. This was a slide from Florida Sea Grant at the end of last year, okay? So 2017, 2018, we were at 14 months of continuous red tide. We've added 2 months here, January, February now. We're at 16 months. We are still only the fifth worst, okay, in terms of duration, but the intensity has increased, and the number of organisms that have died is higher than it's ever been before. Okay, so organism death toll. This is a really hard one to come up with hard and fast numbers because nobody wants to tell you. Right? The only one I can actually give you a definitive answer for.
Sorry, I just walked out.
Okay. Did I do that? Nope. Okay. All right, and manatees. All right, there are distinct kind of manatees and what every single one of the side died from. And that's available at the end of December each year. So we are at 218 manatee deaths. That was 26% of manatee deaths from 2018 were the result of red tide. The rest were cold stuns, boat strikes, things like that. That's a lot of manatee died. Dolphins, okay, we actually put the state count of dolphins. The biggest number I could find anywhere was 1 county for 1 month, not 130. And NOAA up in DC would consider that an unusual mortality event. But I mean, they were sure with red tide. Fish, numbers are probably much higher than the game we were playing in the beginning of how many dollars. 2.7 million pounds with 1 county for 1 month. Alright, so if you think of all the counties and all the months with red dots, that were in billions. Okay, we were having to pay the city workers to haul all those dead fish out to the landfills. So insult to injury. Turtles have not been quantified, and seabirds even sadder. And nobody talks about these seabirds. Dr. Red Tide wrote a lot of them. As my final slide for you guys is, I want you to not just think that Red Tide is the end. Red Tide will come and go, but there are some things we can do that may be helpful, and this is one of them. Coastal Conservation Association is a fishermen's organization that has gotten really into restoration and conservation. They team to do energy at FWC for artificial wildlife. As today, literally today, they were releasing juvenile redfish, looks like this, okay, into the waters on the west coast. This is one of the main species that died, and it is one of the most important ecotourism species. People will come from all over the planet to go redfish fishing in Florida. So you can see a happy guy there. I didn't know, so I didn't really want to show you some crazy face. So just because happy guy, you can still make them happy. And they have 5 more planned release locations in the next month. One of them, though, one of the original release locations is where their dots are turning colors again. So they're just like TBA for that one. Okay, that's me. So I guess next.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Consalo. I'm getting over a cold, so that's why I'm using the microphone, so I don't have to shout, even though Dr. Walters did a great job. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm an attorney by training, and my second career has become teaching. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is the laws and the policies that brought us to the point we're at today. So as Dr. Walters explained, yes, red tide is a natural phenomenon. Florida's had it for years. But Florida has not had both coasts completely covered in it until the last 10 or 20 years. And what I'm going to talk about today is that that is no surprise, that is no coincidence. We have policies and laws and budget cuts that directly led to this terrible outbreak of red tide, and it's going to take a long time to fix it too.
Doesn't work either. There we go. All right, there's your title again. We thought that was quite clever. I hope you guys thought it was clever too. Getting Valentine's Day? Yeah. All right, so where do we start talking about the problem of red tide or any tide? And just like Dr. Walters brought up brown tide, I'm going to bring up blue-green tide. Now, before you all came in here, did you guys know there was going to be this rainbow of tides? Yeah, yeah. They sort of interrelate to some extent, and blue-green algae is actually, to be quite honest, much grosser. It's like green slime, like in the Nickelodeon shows where they can dump the slime on people's head. It has that texture. It's really horrible. So I decided to just completely gross you guys out tonight. We'll talk about both. So I'm glad you're going to leave. So who is supposed to protect the waters in Florida? It's the water management districts. We have 5 of them. They were created in the 1970s after a terrible drought when it was realized that political infighting and boundaries for water jurisdiction based on politics was not working in Florida. So our legislature did something very smart. They drew boundaries for 5 new water management districts based upon hydrology. Not county boundaries, not city boundaries, not gerrymandered boundaries, but actual hydrological boundaries. And for many years that worked really well because the water management districts were fully funded and fully staffed and could actually protect the water supplies within their jurisdiction. So real quick, this is just some of the things the water management districts are supposed to do. Bottom line, they're supposed to protect the water supply and the water resources. That is their job. But what has happened over the last decade? I'm going to give a spoiler. I'm sorry. If you are a huge Rick Scott fan, you can send me hate mail later because I'm going to speak my truth right now. When Governor Scott was elected in 2011, he quite honestly took a very anti-environmental stance. He completely, I was going to use some really elaborate language. He destroyed, but he did destroy. He destroyed the Department of Community Affairs. Does anyone in the room remember the Department of Community Affairs? What was the job of the Department of Community Affairs? Growth management. Protect Florida, protect our citizens, protect us from oversized, unregulated
unregulated growth, and he completely destroyed that agency. He just got rid of it. He said it was useless. That was problem number one. Problem number two was massive cuts to the budgets of the water management districts, not just for 1 year, but what he did to save taxpayers money is he capped the ad valorem taxes they could collect thereafter. And for anyone who isn't familiar with the term, ad valorem taxes are property taxes. It is a huge revenue generator for the water management districts. So in his first year, he cut $700 million from the water districts, and then after that, he capped it. The estimates of how much money the water management districts lost are in the billions of dollars. And he celebrated this. This was a great thing, save the taxpayers money. But when you cut money from an agency tasked with protecting water supply, there are some obvious ramifications. Hundreds of terminations of people who have the scientific knowledge to protect the water supply. Early retirements, elimination of open positions. So basically a loss of manpower and a brain drain. Starting in 2011 and going for basically up until he left office, which was quite recent. Also a reduction to land acquisition. To keep water clean, and probably most of you know this, you need to have conservation land because in Florida our lands naturally clean our water supply. Water restoration projects also put on hold, we're going to talk a little bit about the blame game in a few minutes. But some major projects related directly to protecting water supply from red algae and blue-green algae is a project that's partially federally funded, partially state funded. We're going to talk about that, but basically became a finger pointing who's responsible for this. And finally, water quality monitoring. From Dr. Walter's presentation, you probably realize that we know when an algae bloom is going to come. We can count in the water indicators of every type of algae bloom that's coming. But if there's no one out there monitoring the water, then those counts aren't being done. And all of a sudden we're surprised when the entire Gulf Coast is engulfed in red tide, destroying our businesses, destroying our ecosystem, destroying our aquatic life. But we shouldn't be surprised because we should have these water monitoring stations. And if you can't see this, during Governor Scott's administration, the water monitoring stations across the state went from 350 down to 115. So a lot less science being conducted to protect the water supply. All right, so let's then move on to Governor DeSantis. Okay, so if my slide comes back, we can complain about Governor Scott more, but he basically what the slide was going to get to was there was a whole list of smaller injuries that Governor Scott did to the environment. He was not a fan of the environment, and he was actually openly hostile to it. So we shouldn't have been surprised. No one should have been surprised that almost 10 years later, suddenly we have horrible water quality. We have blooms up and down the Gulf, up and down the Atlantic. We even have blooms south of the Everglades. How did this happen? Well, one of the things that happened in addition to cutting funding to the water management districts, Governor Scott basically replaced every single board member of every single water management district with his own appointees who shared a vision. That's how it works. The governor gets to pick their appointees, that's fine. But the problem is when that vision is directly not to protect water supply, what you get after years and years of this is unregulated water supply. So what is causing the red tide? It's a couple things. As was mentioned, red tide will leach on to any source of nutrient, and that's why we have balloons. You start off with a little natural red tide, but then you feed it. It's like my dog. My dog would be a normal Rottweiler, except for the fact that he gets chicken and ice cream and pancakes on Saturdays, and so he's expanded. He went from a normal Rottweiler to a very fat Rottweiler. The same with the red tide. It's gotten out of control, and there's a couple reasons. One, septic tanks. Septic tanks. Now, a lot of us live in urban Orlando, but a lot of Florida is still on septic tanks, and they're old, and they leak, and they're expensive to replace, so nobody wants to replace them. When they leak, it's poo-poo leaking directly into the water supply, and that eventually makes its way both to freshwater bodies and to saltwater bodies, and we get the red tide. Can anyone think of a very simple way to maybe force people to fix their septic tanks? Write a law. Someone said it. Write a law. Write a law. What the legislature did. And guess who vetoed it? Yeah, Governor Scott vetoed it. Okay, what's another source? What's another source of nutrients to the algae blooms? Fertilizers, nitrogen, phosphorus. Yes, we all use those. But think South Florida. Who uses them the most? Big sugar. God bless it. I don't know if there's any sugar in our dessert tonight, but yeah, big sugar. One of the last, so needless to say, Governor Scott was a fan of big sugar and did not limit the nitrogen and phosphorus that were sinking into water. One of the last things his water management did, the South Florida water management did, right before Governor DeSantis took office. Does anyone know this? They took conservation lands. This was like, what, 3 days before Governor DeSantis took office? They took land designated, bought by the taxpayers, designated for conservation to clean our water supplies, and they granted a lease to Big Sugar to plant sugar on these lands. Yeah, which will be fertilized, and they'll also be poisoned with chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an ongoing problem. We've got human waste, we've got chemical waste driving the red tides. Now, as you saw briefly up on the slides, there is a little bit of hope at this point. And actually, one of my slides, I'm trying to remember my slides. I've been a little down on Governor Scott. It isn't all him, okay? The way we've treated the land, this crazy use of the land, that it's some sort of resource that's constantly renewable no matter what we do to it or how badly we treat it. That's been going on for decades, all right? No administration, no governor, and to be quite honest, most Florida citizens have clean hands when it comes to putting too much fertilizer, poop, and chemicals into our water supply. We all do it, some of us more than others. So it's not just Governor Scott, he just took it to a whole new level of extremism. So now we're here. Both coasts are losing incredible amounts of money in lost revenue, whether it's commercial fisheries, whether it's tourism businesses, whether it's folks who live there and property values are going down as thousands of dead fishes wash up on their backyards. There was a picture, I'm not sure which slide it's on. We talked about some of what's been killed by red tide. There's a picture, I don't know if we can find it. A giant whale shark they think was killed by red tide. Yeah, this is the Florida coast. This was just last year. I mean, how much freaking poison needs to be in the water to kill a whale shark? Okay, this is a very serious problem. Okay, I don't want to take up too much of my time because I know Dr. Clay has things to say too. But can we go back just a little so I can make sure I hit some of the, there's my beautiful, yeah, Rick Scott is here, if you can't see it, yeah. So here's a list of his ills. But one thing I do want to really point out about Governor Scott, it wasn't a Republican-Democrat thing. Protecting the environment really, in Florida, tends to be bipartisan. Both parties want to protect the environment. Governor Scott was an outlier. The problem was he was an outlier who had 2 terms as governor.
Senator.
So now senator, I keep calling him governor. Yeah, I should just say Scott. I'm just going to say Scott. This is being recorded. I'm not going to say that. Okay, it's not out loud. Okay, so yeah, so he shut down septic tank regulations. He ended Governor Bush's Springs Restoration Initiative. He proposed selling off lots of conservation lands. Scott was into that. He capped Big Sugar's financial liability for water cleanups. He eliminated Department of Community Affairs. And of course, as we all know, he prohibits the use of climate change, words climate change or global warming. Okay. So I already talked about this, years of poor use of land. The outdated damming of Lake Okeechobee is a major cause. If any, and I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly. But if you're not familiar with Lake Okeechobee, it is the largest lake in Florida. It has a very old dam, an earthen dam that's been falling apart. The federal government was supposed to fix it and build a reservoir to store the water in Lake Okeechobee, because the water in Lake Okeechobee is utterly poisoned. It's surrounded by agricultural fields, and so there's a lot of pesticides and fertilizers and other types of waste that have been washing into Lake Okeechobee for years. It used to be the bass fishing capital of the world. Now it's just a poisoned lagoon. But Lake Okeechobee was traditionally a natural source of water flow down to the Everglades. It would flood. It was intended to flood. Lake Okeechobee was supposed to flood fairly often in the summer, and the overflow waters would trickle down to the Everglades, feeding the Everglades. But we didn't like that. That was inconvenient to us as citizens of Florida. So the Army Corps dammed Okeechobee, stopped that natural flooding, so those waters no longer get down to the Everglades, and worse, all the poison from the farms is trapped within the lake. Now when it rains, what happens? If it rains enough, those earthen dams overflow and these farms get flooded with the nasty toxic water, and the farmers don't like that. So instead, what the Army Corps did is they have dikes that allow all the poison water to go out to the Gulf or out to the Atlantic coast, and then some of it still trickles down through the Everglades and south of the Everglades. So all that fertilizer and all that poison washes directly into the two coasts, and that's one of the major reasons we have these blooms. So, you guys could have hopefully read this and skip this because I don't want to take too much of my time. One of the things we really need to deal with is the Lake Okeechobee situation. And the federal government was supposed to build this new damming system and have a storage facility, a water storage facility, so that the water could be cleaned before it was released at all. And the federal government's not finishing it, and the state of Florida hasn't been finishing it, and it's been a finger-pointing ordeal. And it is a major reason for the red algae. And here's an image of just what red algae looks like with one sad little dead fish. But if you've ever seen the results of red algae, or smelled it, thousands and thousands and thousands of dead fishes washed up on the coast. It's horrible. It's a nightmare. Okay, I can keep going. So, the hopeful part. I did not think I would say this. Governor DeSantis may be our environmental champion. He also issued an executive order. I believe it was his third day in office. He's issued a 3 or 4 page executive order. I think we have some copies if anyone's interested in seeing it. All about protecting the environment. All about basically what a bad job Governor Scott did and how Governor DeSantis is going to step in and save the day. He's earmarked might be a strong word. He set a laudable goal that during his 4 years in office, he will spend $2.5 billion to protect the environment. Of that, approximately $25 million is specific for blue-green algae task force, red algae scientific research, and emergency technological responses to the current blooms we're having over and over again. So $25 million right off the bat to limiting algae. He's also said that he wants to appoint a chief science officer. Science! To protect water. What a novel idea. I'm like, wow, this guy gets it. Yeah, so this is awesome. And he does not like big sugar. I'm shocked, but he doesn't. He calls it corporate welfare. And big sugar is one of the major contributors to the nitrogen and phosphorus that are causing the red tide blooms. I'm pretty stoked with that opinion. And I think I'm going to be wrapping up here. This is what I just said. There you go. I gave him a whole slide, just how great he is. Someone can send him this presentation. And I keep saying this is my last slide, but it's not totally my fault. I got a little confused with the slide stuff. But it's not just government we have to rely on. We all can take steps to try to stop contributing to the red tide problem. If we're on septic, we can make sure our septic works properly. If we have a house, we can stop using fertilizers on our yard. Grass is allowed to be brown in January. It's acceptable. And I think as Floridians, we need to adjust our minds to the fact that we don't need to dump so much fertilizer to keep our yards looking nice. But also, as a lawyer, we can sue. We have that power as citizens, the power of the lawsuit. We can sue for a lot of different things. There are federal laws and state laws designed to allow citizens to sue the government and to sue the people poisoning the waters. Okay? Florida has a public trust where the government of Florida is actually obligated legally to protect our water supply, and if they drop the ball, you and me as citizens can sue them to force them to do their job. We have federal laws. There is, in fact, a lawsuit going under the Endangered Species Act, right? No, wait. Actually, let me talk about this real quick. Okay, so there is the start to a lawsuit. It was filed by the Center for Biological Diversity, the Calusa Waterkeeper, and the Waterkeeper Alliance. They have filed a notice of intent to sue with the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps has 60 days to do something to fix the problem. They're not going to get the problem fixed. And then inevitably, an Endangered Species Act lawsuit is going to be filed shortly thereafter. Also, the Florida Wildlife Federation has sued the South Florida Water Management District based on that lease I mentioned. Based on that last minute lease that they gave to Big Sugar, it was so last minute, they might have forgotten a few of the little public notice requirements under the law, and so it may be undone. We also, as citizens, have the right to tort lawsuits. I don't know if any that have actually been filed, but basically citizens who have dead fishes washing up on their backyard, or whose businesses have been tanked by the impact of red algae, could file tort lawsuits, and there's a couple of law firms that are actively looking for clients. So just, put a pin in that if you think you might be in the works for some big money. And that is my last slide, so thank you all very much.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Richard Plate. Just kind of sake of transparency, I would not consider myself an expert on red tide. If I claim any expertise, it is on sort of framing conversations about natural resources in a productive way. So basically, a few months ago, Karen asked me, Dr. Consalo asked me to participate in this, and so for those few months, I've been reading an awful lot about red tide. I have grown up with it. I grew up here in Winter Park and would vacation over in Sarasota in the summer, so I've had some direct experience with red tide for a lot of years. So anyway, the approach I've taken to this presentation is, to some degree, a little bit of an outsider's view, maybe, on maybe how to have better conversations about red tides. So, Dr. Walters pointed this out, so I'll just kind of briefly review. But basically, there's some uncertainty about, and keep in mind, I'm talking about red tide, so Perinia brevis on the west coast. I will sort of expand later on and include some of the other tides that we're talking about, the other colors that we're talking about. But these slides are all specific to red tide. So there are a few levels of uncertainty here that I think it's important to acknowledge when we're talking about how to address red tide. One is the linkage between red tide plumes and coastal pollution. So there are lots of forms of nutrients that red tides can use. Not all of those are necessarily coming off the coast, so it's hard to pin that down, and scientists are still working on that. The other one is, even if we can pin it down to coastal pollution, we don't know sort of which ones those are, what's the culprit, where to point the finger at. And I think that's important to acknowledge when we're talking about what to do about red tide. So I'm going to talk about 3 different categories of management tools to address red tide. I think that sort of all 3 need to be covered in a coordinated way. So we've got measures that reduce human contributions to red tide. So this is dealing mostly with that pollution coming off land, and nitrates and phosphates. Measures to control or limit red tide blooms when they occur. So if there is a bloom, what can we do to try to decrease the intensity of that bloom? And then the third is measures to decrease the impacts of those blooms. So not decreasing the intensity per se, but how can we respond in terms of our kind of social and ecological responses to try to decrease the impacts that communities feel. So when dealing with this level of uncertainty, I think it's important to kind of start with premises, start with sort of, this is kind of the foundation that I'm starting from, some common ground that kind of regardless of where one is on the issue, that we can agree upon. So my first one here, nutrient loads from land may intensify red tide plumes once they're initiated. So as Dr. Walter said, red tide plumes are actually initiated way offshore. When they blow back into shore, it may be there's pollutants coming off of land that exacerbate, that intensify that red tide. But there is a may there. There are some other mechanisms that could also be playing a role there, and that's why we've seen red tide for a very long time. So there are a few ways to kind of respond then to this level of uncertainty. And one is something called the precautionary principle. Basically, when there is uncertainty, err on the side of caution. So most of you probably wore a seatbelt coming here. You wasted your time, in a sense, because you're here, you made it safely, that seatbelt did nothing for you. But we err on the side of caution. If we're not sure if something's going to happen, so we err on the side of caution. That's the same idea here. The other one, though, that I think is really the stronger one, there are lots of reasons for drawing down the nutrient loads in waters in Florida in general, not just red tide. So in reading a lot of the literature on this, a lot of the sort of debate within kind of science and within this more of a social-ecological context, I kept thinking of this comic that came out years ago. It's in so many places now, it's hard to attribute it. I'm not sure. I think it came out in USA Today the first time. So this is about climate change, where I spend a lot of my time thinking about, and if you can't, it's kind of small text, but basically, they're saying down here, what if it's all just a hoax, and we create a better world for nothing? So in other words, what if there isn't really climate change, and all we're doing is getting energy independence, and we're preserving our rainforests, and we're shifting to a renewable resource, and we're cleaning our water? Wouldn't that be awful if that was just all we ended up with? And I think the same argument can be applied to red tide. So what if red tide isn't being intensified by land-based pollution? Then if we address if we draw down nutrients in our Florida water bodies, we're just going to be stuck with reduced blue-green algae, healthier coral reefs, healthier springs, less risk to human health. Like, I'm okay with all of these things being the outcome of our efforts to draw down nutrients. It doesn't have to be necessarily tied to red tide. So with that context then, if we're thinking about drawing that down, this has kind of been covered already, so I can go quickly through this. So we talked about the agricultural runoff, stormwater runoff, yard fertilizer, septic tanks, all these non-point source pollution. So in other words, a little bit coming from lots of folks. And some of the tools, some of the management tools we have to try to address these are, many of them, so there are certainly some legal aspects, many of them are voluntary, the tools that we use. So we incentivize best management practices on the part of agriculture. We can have more conservation programs. So one of the ways to try to decrease the amount of nutrients going out into our coastal waters is to have more natural land soaking up those nutrients before they get there, providing financial assistance to those. There are some examples of fertilizer bans on the West Coast that we could spend like the whole evening just talking about those. There's a lot of stuff out there on those. The third premise then I'm going to use here, and this is the last of my premises, addressing Florida's red tide is about more than nutrient load. So I want to try to kind of expand that conversation a little bit. Certainly that's part of it, that's the prevention part. I'm trying to deal with nutrient loads. But the other two categories that I gave you of tools are actually different. So measures to control red tide blooms where they occur. There are a few things being done. Frankly, and this slide is like where I know the least, I guess. So hopefully there won't be any questions on this, but and maybe Dr. Walters can fill in stuff. But some of the methods that are being used out there. Clay flocculation is essentially spraying clay over the surface and letting those particles sink down, and they sort of get red tide stuck to them as they sink, and hopefully they sink all the way to the bottom, whether or not, and without breaking the cells. Dr. Walters talked about if you break those cells before they sink down, then you release that toxin to the water anyway. The downside of this is metal contamination in the clay. They've used ozone, and it's been effective in closed areas, so like in a canal or something like that, where they actually pump ozone through the water, and it tears up both the cells and the toxin itself. Hugely expensive though, probably not something that would be applicable when you've got the intensity of the blooms that we've had recently. Some other things, hydrogen peroxide enzymes are things that they're continuing to work on. But I do think this is, again, where some of the research should be going in terms of addressing red tide. And then the third one measures the decrease the impacts of red tide blooms. So, and again, I think both the previous speakers talked about the importance of monitoring. and how we've gotten away from that. So the more we're out there looking for kind of where it is and being watchful of it, the sooner that we can respond to it, and the sooner that we can sort of advise people about kind of where to go and try to avoid it as well. I'll point out that in terms of things we can do for voters, there is a volunteer organization where, for lack of funding, for lack of actual professionals doing it, there is a whole volunteer organization around kind of trying to identify those hotlines to call if you find yourself sort of coughing or see a bunch of dead fish, to report that in, to try to give some up-to-date information on that. We could do a lot more human dimensions research in terms of sort of got some estimates about sort of the economic impacts of this. There's social impacts as well related to this. And then a lot more education and outreach, partly so we can get some consistent messaging about red tide. I guess what my sort of pet peeve in a lot of whether it's climate change or whether it's red tide, is people talking past each other. Everybody just sort of with their own assumptions and not really kind of listening. And again, I think part of getting beyond that, I think, is sort of getting a sort of foundation that we kind of agree upon and then working from there, building from there. So the management challenges to addressing red tide there are that we've got lots of different levels of government involved with this type of management. So, and you don't need it, this text is tiny, but all I really need you to get from this figure is that there's lots of things out there. So we've got federal scale, state scale, and regional and local, and trying to coordinate all of this in terms of coordinating a research plan, so that we're all sort of trying to answer, we're all kind of on the same page with the types of questions we want to answer scientifically, and coordinating a response plan. All of that can be very difficult when you've got sort of these horizontal linkages and then vertical linkages. All of these folks have a hand in trying to address red tide. So, my one suggestion then for doing this, looking backward, and I think Dr. Consalo mentioned this briefly. So we used to have a harmful algae bloom task force. This was an organization that was basically tasked with these four things. So reviewing the research, monitoring that, chemical, biological, economic, and public health factors, and coordinating that research. Developing research priorities, making recommendations to state and local governments, and making recommendations to essentially the FWC. That they filed their single report in 1999, and that's the last we've heard that task force is part of the defunding that Dr. Consalo was talking about. So what I would like to see then is a sort of new and improved task force. One of the knocks against that task force was it was largely representatives from the regulating agencies. So I would like to see sort of a more inclusive task force, but doing many of those same things, trying to coordinate both scientifically how we're going to try to understand the dynamics of red tide better to see what flips these things, and try to coordinate the response that we have to red tides, both in forms of trying to decrease the intensity of blooms and trying to coordinate, again, human behavior to decrease the impacts on local communities. In my dream of this task force, it would have broader inclusion here, so more input. Both Marine Lab is taking a lead on this kind of stuff, so more input from research centers, more input from scientists, and more input from stakeholder groups as well. With the goal of depoliticizing the issue, with the goal of, again, having sort of so just in reading about this stuff over the last few months, it is just a mess of different kind of ideas and claims, I guess, about what's going on. So it would be great to have a more sort of coordinated effort on this. So people could easily go to a place and get what they feel like is fairly accurate information about what to do, what's going on, what to be worried about, what to be less worried about, that kind of thing. That again, I think would promote more productive conversations about this. So then, my kind of advice for discussing red tide One, it can be a spark for action, right? So if you, the kinds of numbers that Dr. Walters was talking about in terms of organisms being killed, Dr. Consalo's images, something like the whale shark. So that stuff gets people's attention, and you know, that can be important. You want to use that. But I would be wary of kind of playing the nutrient card too hard just in the context of red tide, because you can get stuck in this sort of quandary of the weeds, basically, of trying to, well, is it septic tanks, is it something else? Is it, you know, iron dust being blown in that's starting up another algae further out to sea? There's lots of mechanisms that could be doing this. And I don't think that's where, I mean, those are good questions for us to be researching. I don't think that's where we want the public debate to be happening, because that's where you sort of get stuck doing nothing at all. So I would consider red tide as a good entry point. You know, looking at some of the images that we've seen as a good entry point to a much larger conversation that includes the brown tide, the blue-green algae coming out, that includes the mess that has become our water system in Florida as a whole, because that's, you know, really the major problem. Don't tie it too closely just to red tide itself. And I believe that wraps me up.
Right. So we're going to take about 10 minutes to go around. If anybody has any questions for the panel, please raise your hand.
Is there anything to be done about the sewage systems? Like the city of Orlando ships everything up to the Hive River, and they don't take out the nitrogen. All that stuff is nitrogen out, and it filters to the Hive. I mean, is that something we can do? Is get them to actually spend the money to take the nitrogen out?
I couldn't hear what it was they were not filtering out.
Nitrogen.
Oh, it can't be forced. You can force the government to do something that they're legally obligated to do. But if it's discretionary, like whether to clean it or not, you can't force it. What you can do is Orlando takes a lot of pride in being one of the sustainable cities in America. I think they've actually won awards for it. So continuing to, I guess, pressure or bring the issue to the elected officials' attention. This is a sustainability issue. This is a clean water issue. I will tell you this, Orlando sends a lot of its wastewater out to the Orlando Wetlands Park, where it's a beautiful park. If you haven't been out there, it's gorgeous. The public's welcome to come. I make my students go, so some of you may have gone. And they do it filters pretty much everything, including nitrogen. I was not personally aware that they sent any water up to the Hive, but I think
Rapid infiltration basins. Conserve tubes. That's a good Scrabble word.
So I wasn't aware they were sending it to Hive, but it might be something where you just ask, listen, why are we sending water to Hive when we have this 6,000-acre natural cleansing system? Why don't we expand that instead? But really, it's a matter of political will rather than something that can be forced legally.
For Ms. Walters, you said that this was not the worst red tide event, however, we're seeing the most mammals being killed? Or
I said it wasn't the longest.
longest, okay.
Yeah.
So why would we have the largest deaths? I was just wondering if it was...
The intensity of the cell count has been higher.
Okay.
So yeah, I should have been a little more clear with that.
In the back there.
Hey, is there a natural organism that feeds off of any of these types?
As far as I know, and I'm not going to pretend I know all the stuff that's going on, there isn't anything that specifically goes for it, some bioengineered kind of creature yet. It is, you know, consumed by anything that filter feeds, and it will be held in their guts or pooped out by those, but not right now. Okay, do we want to bioengineer? That's a whole other lecture series right there. And they haven't found any chemicals that are easy. You know, we talked about a few that would work in the small channel, but the cost to everything else in the channel is going to die also.
Good question here.
Yeah, the question is, do the red algae, does it feed on itself and it dies, and adding to that bad cycle of...
That's the microbial loop. The bacteria and viruses are going to feed on the death,
and they're going to produce oxygen, so they're going to make it so that it all keeps going. So the dying isn't enough. We need to have fewer cells.
For Dr. Walters, I was wondering if you could elaborate or just speak on what you know about the sources specifically, like how much maybe coming from agriculture versus septic tanks.
I honestly have no idea. I wouldn't even want to speculate. We all know there's a lot, but I'm going to pass it over one way or the other.
Nobody does. That's not a lack of knowledge on Dr. Walters' part. That's an unknown at this point.
You said that the red tide is native and can't be linked directly to aerostatic centers or energetic forces. Is that the same with the green algae, or do you know that that's like that from the article?
And I'm not a biologist, but that's an excellent question. The blue-green tends to pop up in freshwater, well not tends to, it's in freshwater, and then the red is in ocean salt water.
And it's a lot more obvious in Lake Okeechobee what's going on, and the diking it, and all the farm waste of different sorts all in there. Because you can see the color of the water, even when a bloom's not going on, that this is bad stuff. And you know, they only release water when there's a lot of rain or something. So I know people who do oyster restoration on the East Coast, right near where the canals come out, and the oysters die every time. There's no surprise here. So there are a lot of organisms that are suffering when any of these releases happen. So I would never want to work there because everything you do is dead at least once a year. Now, if you're doing restoration, that just doesn't sound like a good plan. That's a really good question. Clay?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for being here. I've really enjoyed this. I have a hydrological, ecological question. So it seems, and what we know from research is that wetlands are so important for removing a lot of these nutrients. Also, planted aquifer recharge zones are super important as well. However, when you look at the interaction between bionutrients and an estuary environment, it seems as though these discharges are so immediately deadly. So what is key in an estuary habitat for removing these nutrients if they're so deadly to filter feeders right from the get-go? Is it a mangrove buffer? Is it some kind of terrestrial interplay? What's going on there?
A lot of it's the sediment. We don't think about mud as something that we love, but a lot of the nutrients are being sequestered into the mud. So when we do a lot of land development, especially on making these canals to have houses to dock, we are bringing out all sorts of stuff. So that's where the muck is coming from.
But this is anoxic, so it's not breaking down, it's just getting entombed there? Or?
Well, it moves around. I mean, different things are degrading it, so there's a whole book on this sort of thing. But in general, the mangroves will sequester some of the nutrients. Blue carbon is a popular term. Any of the shellfish will be sequestering, both in their shells and their soft tissues. We have a lot of organisms that will naturally take in these nutrients. We just, 1,000 years ago, didn't put so many nutrients in. But we as humans have made it a lot worse.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question. Hi, can you guys say anything else about the water storage facilities that are supposed to filtrate the water from Lake Okeechobee down to South Florida?
Sure. So again, Lake Okeechobee, it's a very old dam that holds it in right now. And we can't destroy that dam because there's too much in property value all around it at this point. So they are trying to, there's a couple of capital improvement projects going on. There's new modern dams to try to keep the flooding from happening. And then this reservoir that is also supposed to hold some of the water and filter it. The problem has been that it's been on pause for, well, it should have been moving along, it should have already been completed, it's been on pause for quite a while. Again, it's an issue of so many government agencies involved, and then you have different public interest groups involved, and it keeps getting stalled. It is one of Governor DeSantis's, he's saying it's one of his #1 goals. It was in that executive order I mentioned that he issued the first couple of days in office, was get these capital improvements around Lake Okeechobee, get them done. Because, as Dr. Clegg said, it's not just red tide. It's not just, and I mentioned blue-green algae is freshwater algae, so that's actually what's in Lake Okeechobee. But the problem is, a lot of the research indicates that it also exacerbates red tide once it hits the coast. So it is part of the whole protecting a lot of problems with the environment in South Florida is to get these capital improvements built. But they are not